Welcome, everybody, to the Let Purple Rain podcast. This is Fantasy Rain Rundown, my weekly off-season podcast show. I am Joe Arpasi, otherwise known as Purple Rain. I started my CFF work in 2008, and after stepping away for 8 years, I returned in 2024 as Purple Rain. You can find all of my content on letpurplerain.com. You can also follow the Let Purple Rain podcast on YouTube and Spotify. You can really help the Spotify channel grow by leaving a 5-star review. I'd really appreciate it if you went ahead and did. And you can also follow me on X at UW_purple_rain, and that is spelled REIGN. And I want to start today's show with kind of a short recap of what went on last week with the content that I put out. After that, I'm going to be going into our topic for the day, which is difficult players to project. And then it's going to be Mailbag Time, where I answer your submitted questions. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's dive into some college fantasy football. Last week in the Week in Review, I put out 3 different articles. I put out 2 articles in the My Guys series. That is the article series where I review players that I look to target in most of my fantasy drafts. And I wrapped up that article series last week with the wide receivers and tight ends. And the CFF Offenses to Target podcast episode, that was where I reviewed my top 10 CFF offenses for 2025. And for the My Guys wide receivers, I wanted to go over a player from the premium section of the article that I really liked, and that's David Amador from UTSA. He's a guy that has made a number of things that I've written about all throughout the offseason that I really find important for fantasy success. I selected him to be a flyer at the wide receiver position this year. He's going to be challenging Devin McEwen for that wide receiver 1 role in the UTSA passing game. And UTSA has a CFF coaching system that I have ranked number 25 for target magnet wide receivers. He was highlighted 5 times as a schedule pairing option. And when it comes to passing strength of schedule for UTSA, for the first month of the season and for season long, I graded them out with a B, and I gave them a B- for the playoffs. Switching over to the My Guys tight ends. Another guy from the premium section of that article was Jack Endries from Texas. I selected him to be a riser candidate for this year. Texas has a CFF coaching system that ranks number 14 in high volume tight ends. Their passing strength of schedule is a little bit better than UTSA here. I gave them a B for the first month of the season and for the season long, and I graded them out as a B+ for the playoffs. I'm wrapping up this quick week in review. The top CFF offenses to target. I had to pick one of the most loaded offenses here from 2025, and this is another team that was in the premium section of that podcast, the LSU Tigers. I ranked them number 4 on my top 10 list of CFF offenses that you should be looking at in your drafts. They were just barely beat out by Louisville, who ranked number 3. For CFF coaching systems, they have the number 12 system for pocket passers, number 39 system for power 3 wide receivers, number 28 system for high volume tight ends. Their passing strength of schedule, I gave them a B+ for the first month, a B for season long, and a B- for the playoffs. The pass catching guys that you want to look out for on this offense is quarterback Garrett Nussmeier, wide receivers Aaron Anderson, Chris Hilton, Barium Brown, Xavion Thomas, and Nick Anderson, and tight ends Tradez Green and Bauer Sharp. For rushing strength of schedule, I gave LSU a B for the first month of the season, and then I gave them a B+ for season long in the playoffs. And the one rushing option that's out there that you could be looking at in your drafts would be running back Caden Durham. Now, we are going to switch over to our topic of the day. And if you're already catching the rhythm of this is going to be a quick, fast-paced podcast. What I wanted to pick out here, since my draft guide is coming out on Monday, I wanted to look back at the players that I was projecting and picking a handful of guys that I felt like were just really difficult, that I really had to spend a lot of time on. And what better way to transition to this than we just talked about the LSU offense and wanting to target it in your drafts. So why don't we talk about LSU wide receivers? The first thing that I had to do when looking at these guys, I had to assess the pecking order for how these wide receivers are going to shake out. I mentioned 5 different guys when I was going over the CFF offenses to target. Aaron Anderson led the team last year, and I felt like he's probably the safest choice to be the wide receiver one this season. So and he's also locked in the as the starter for the slot. So for me, I felt like that was an easy one. I'm going to leave him as a wide receiver one. Um, Chris Hilton, he's a guy who has the ability to be the wide receiver one, but he's struggled staying healthy in his career. I think he has the highest upside of all the outside wide receivers, but there's no certainty he will be the best of that group. Uh, I locked in his position battle status as contested. That's where I'm thinking it's kind of down between him and one other person that could take that wide receiver two spot. Um, and the reason I put him contested there is because of Barry and Brown. Brown's a guy who's also on the outside, and he could be more productive than Hilton if Hilton misses time with injury. So I kind of had a really close, 2-3 there between Hilton and Brown. Um, Brown is good enough, and he has a good enough track record to be featured as a starter in this offense. So that kind of made it easy for me to look at sliding him into that wide receiver three spot. But I understand that Xavier Thomas or Nick Anderson could challenge for production. Since there's more than two guys that I'm looking at that potentially could be wide receiver three, I made Brown's position status, I call it wide open. And that's just what I do. Anytime that there's more than two guys I think are battling for a spot. Um, I did include a wide receiver four in my projections and my player rankings for this LSU wide receiver core. Xavier Thomas was getting a lot of buzz in spring camp, and the coaches are looking to use him in the running game more. I decided to lean into the spring camp buzz and place Thomas over Nick Anderson for that wide receiver four spot. But that very well is a toss up. I mean, you could pick either one of those guys to be that next in line number four guy. Um, so with that whole thought process laid out here of how I landed on, this is going to give you an idea of how I landed on these projections. And the way I kind of wrapped up these top four, Nick Anderson is that wide receiver one. I had him at 183.8 fantasy points. Hilton, I had at 176.3 fantasy points. Brown coming in at the wide receiver three, I have him at 85.7 fantasy points. And Thomas bringing up the rear as that wide receiver four, I've got him at 59.7 fantasy points. So there's my breakdown of how I reviewed these LSU wide receivers. And now let's look at a running back room that was also just kind of painstaking to try and guess what direction it's headed in. And that's the Northern Illinois running backs. As I mentioned before, if I think there's more than two guys that are battling for a specific role, I place the position battle as wide open. That's a status that I like to use. And that's the way that I have all three of these guys that I'm about to talk about listed, is that I think it's wide open. Any one of them could be the wide running back one here. We got Telly Johnson. He's the most experienced back returning to the team. He has great talent and was my first thought as the locked in running back one during the winter. Then spring camp rolled around, and Jalen Poe started to get a steady drumbeat of praise from the coaches. And he was also splitting time with Johnson on the first team offense. So that did raise some eyebrows for me. Then the spring portal rolled around, and the team went out and signed Siobhan Wright from Charleston. That is in West Virginia, folks, Division II. The new offensive coordinator here for Northern Illinois is Quinn Sanders, and he came from Charleston. So he knows exactly what Wright is capable of and why they went and grabbed him out of the transfer portal. Last season, Wright ran for 2,235 yards and 38 touchdowns, which is nuts. The connection that Sanders and Quinn have, along with him signing, it means you can't count him out as that potential starter. So I had to try and come up with a pecking order when I think every one of these guys has a case to be the running back one. I gave Johnson the edge, mainly I think he has that talent, and the coaches remarking how he'll be a big piece of the offense next season really was kind of what pushed me into thinking I'll put Telly as that running back one. I penciled in Wright as a running back two, since he has experience and proven production, which Poe lacks. While Poe is listed as a running back three, I believe he will see the field. And this looks like this is going to create a monster running back by committee situation for Northern Illinois, but they are an offensive system that can handle running a lot of guys out there and still having some fantasy potential. And so thinking about all three of these guys being in the mix, getting carries, I started by looking at workload and I projected 200 carries for Johnson, 141 for Wright, and 90 for Poe. With that thought process laid out, I landed on these projections here. Johnson at the running back 1 with 193.1 fantasy points, Wright at the running back 2 with 133.2 fantasy points, and then Poe at the the running back 3 coming in at 76.0 fantasy points. All right, we are on to our last session of this quick-paced episode here, and it's mailbag time. This is the portion of the show where I answer your submitted questions. You can submit questions to me on X or through Substack's chat feature. You can ask me questions about college fantasy football, college football, movies, music, life in general, really anything you want, guys. I'm here for you. Just fire away. I'm going to put out things, each week, letting you know that I'm taking your questions. And I'm going to start off here with our first question. This comes from Steve at SJJackson2 on X. He asked, which non-starting running back am I interested in drafting most? So I'm going to take a sip of water here before we jump into this answer. So when I was looking through the draft guide that I put together, my player rankings, two guys really just stood out from the rest of the pack. Katron Allen from Penn State and Duke Watson from Louisville. I have them ranked close to each other, and they're in the same tier of my rankings. So I view them really similarly. I'll give Allen the slight edge here because we know what we can get from him. So I find him a little safer option of the two. And, I'll take a guy that gets a big workload like him. Duke, I think there is still some speculation around him of just how good he's going to be, how many carries he's going to get. So, I'm kind of leaving that one, leaving him as the number 2 of that group. Next question here comes from Kevin at Lord Overton on Substack. He asked, what position would I select first in a 52-man league? And I think he's trying to hint and get a little idea of what my draft strategy is going to be for the 52-man league that I'm hosting. I'm going to start off by saying that my FBS player rankings cover enough players for the 52-man league that I'm hosting. So I made sure to build in enough people and make it really deep so that way you have a resource that you can use in the league that I'm promoting. I kind of feel it would be irresponsible not to do that for you guys. So when it comes to this big of a draft, you're basically at the mercy of draft position. You could be drafting number 3 and have your choice of guys. You could be drafting number 48. If you're back there at number 48, you're going to get kind of whatever lands to you. And so I think that you just kind of have to draft the best player on the board for your first pick. I would probably avoid tight end, so I'll throw that one out there to kind of narrow it down for you. So it would really come down to which quarterback, running back, and receivers are available at the highest tiers in their position groups. And so I really would look at the tiers that I have listed out in my player rankings. And, if I've got one position that has tier 3 guys and the other positions are down to tier 4 and 5, I'm just going to go with the highest rated guy by tier and just kind of allow that to dictate where I'm going to go position-wise. So I hope that helps with your question there. Question number 3. This comes from Alex Huddle at HuddleA12 on X. He asked, rank these quarterback wide receiver stack opportunities and which wide receivers I'd select. The schools that he provided was Texas, Auburn, USC, and Clemson. I'm going to do this through like a process of elimination. This was the easiest way for me to get you a good answer here. I'm going to start with number 5, and I've got Auburn listed there. If you're going to do this, you have to target Cam Coleman with your first pick, maybe your second pick. If you're like drafting toward the back of the pack, you might be able to land him in round 2. But I think that you're basically locked into having to go after Coleman. That is going to take away some opportunities that you have with running backs if you wanted to double tap running backs in the first 2 rounds, or if you wanted to go after one of the top tier quarterbacks. So that's one thing I kind of didn't like about this stack here. And for Arnold at quarterback, I think he needs to be able to play at a level we've not seen from him yet to be as valuable as these other QBs here with these teams. So those factors made me put Auburn at 5th. 4th, I'm going to go with USC. Mailava, he's still maturing, and he doesn't bring that same rushing ability we like in a Lincoln Riley quarterback. But for the wide receivers, I like Lane a little more than Lemon. But I'd take either one of these guys if the price is right in a draft. So, I mean, I'd shoot for both. I'm just going to say price is everything. I wouldn't reach for either guy except for maybe a round. If you're specifically trying to do a stack, I think it's okay to reach a round. 1 round, I should say. Number 3 here for your answer, I'm going to say Clemson. It might be a surprise for some of you guys out there, but I love Klubnik and the proven fantasy production of these wide receivers. This is the safest wide receiver group of all these teams, but I also have them ranked lower than most people do. And for those of you that pick up my draft guide here this week, you'll be surprised at kind of how low I have all these Clemson guys. And it's mainly because I think the ball's going to get spread around too much in this offense, and that really dragged down the projections for Williams, Moore, and Westco. So Williams, just to start out with, I think he's way too pricey for my blood. So I'm not looking at him considering where he's going in drafts and where I have him projected. I'm just hands off on him. So I would say when you're targeting a wide receiver here, let someone draft Moore or Westco first, then go after whichever guy is remaining, kind of going with the model of get the cheapest guy, basically. Number 2, I'm going to go with Texas. I have faith in Arch, being a good fantasy quarterback this year, despite him only having really limited playing experience. This offense might also spread the ball around to a bunch of targets like we were talking about with Clemson. But if I'm looking at those targets, I would go after Wingo over Mosley. Mosley's one of those guys, he's been going too high in my eyes, so I kind of have a hard time saying go after him. But I'd also take shots on Moore in the late rounds of draft. And at number 1, I ended up picking LSU, and LSU passing game. What a surprise! They're all over this episode here this week. With LSU, I think Nussmeier gives a great fantasy floor that you can really rely on for your team. I've talked about all these wide receivers earlier in the show, and really to sum it up, Aaron Anderson is the only proven guy of this group, so he's the only one I'd target out of that. Our next question number 4, comes from Garrett Jan van der Perk. I hope I said that right. At Perk Costs JE on Substack. He asked me, what's the difference between college fantasy football and C2C versus NFL when it comes to draft strategy? And, unfortunately here, Gary, I don't do NFL fantasy, so I'm not the best suited to answer this one for you. But the little bit of insight I can try and give you here is on the NFL side, there's not many, something I've noticed, there's not many sleepers that slip through the cracks in drafts. That community is pretty tuned in to those handful of guys, that you would look at as sleepers in an NFL draft. And you don't see a lot of variance with, they just seem to fall in line where they're supposed to fall in line. And with CFF, there is more variance with these sleeper type of guys. You can land good sleepers in late rounds that other drafters skip on. And I think that's kind of the biggest difference that I see is that I think you can find better value if you're more in tuned, you're more educated with the player pool. And with NFL, it just kind of seems like everyone's just kind of lock in step. And for the most part, they just kind of know those up and coming guys and where they should fall. For our 5th question, I'm going with a second one here from Adam Huddle on X. He asked, who is my favorite all-time UW quarterback? Well, there's a bunch of quarterbacks I really like for the Huskies. Sonny Six Killer, Jake Locker, Mark Brunell, Warren Moon, Michael Penix, just to name a few. But I'm not going to go with any of them here. I'm going to have to pick a guy that I played football against from Little League through high school out in the state of Washington. And he's also the first player in NCAA history to throw for 300 yards and run for 200 yards in a single game. That man is Marcus Tuiasosopo.
October 30th, 1999.
Stanford at Washington.
The most fun I've ever played in the game.
The greatest individual quarterback performance by Marcus Tuiasosopo.
We knew we had our hands full, but we didn't care. We wanted to show them what we're all about.
Wants to throw. Has a man in the middle of the field. Whoa, great catch, Gerald Harris. Remarkable catch by Harris. That goes to Tuiasosopo. Wanted to throw deep. Nobody down there. Takes off. He's remarkable. He's absolutely remarkable. He is a tough guy. Ball thrown to the end zone. Touchdown. Gerald Harris goes into the end zone and reels in the touchdown. Option. Good block. Gets him around the corner. Touchdown. Dominic Dasty, number 60, made the big block that got him going. Elliott, give it to big old fullback. No, took it out, kept it, touchdown. And Washington takes the lead for the first time today.
I was actually in the post-game press conference, and our SID, he just goes, "Have you realized what you've done?" And I was thinking to myself, we beat the first place Stanford. This is great. He goes, "No." He goes, "From a statistical standpoint, no one's ever thrown for 300 yards and rushed for 200 yards in one game." You know, at the time, I was so overjoyed and just so fired up that we'd won the game. Like, I didn't really care.
So all of you guys listening on an audio podcast here, I was just showing a little video of Marcus Tuiasosopo. And I'm going to transition here over to my very last question. This is a second question from Kevin on Substack. And we're in the same neighborhood of questions here. Who is my favorite Husky of all time? And I laughed when I read that question, Kevin, because that one's pretty easy to figure out if you watch this podcast on YouTube. I have a giant purple hint on the wall behind me of who is that player. And so I'm going to go ahead and play another quick video clip here.
Dog at Washington, who was a one-man wrecking crew for the Huskies. Number 1, Steve Entman, Washington.
Surprised he made the list.
In my mind, the number 1 player in Washington football history is Steve Entman.
Steve Entman, 6'4", 280-pounder, there to make the stop.
Man, what do I think about Steve Entman? How does it get any bigger than him?
He is big in a lot of ways, not only in stature, but in his performance on a football field.
So Steve Entman was a part of these Husky defenses that were absolutely no fun to play against.
He was just a giant wrecking ball. He would just tear things up. Just take a look at him, number 9. He has all the tools, and he plays every down like it's his last down.
He had to commit 2 guys to Entman, and even committing 2 guys to Entman, he was still in the backfield all the time.
Hand off to Chavez, and boom, guess who got it? Number 9.
It was a race to the quarterback, and sometimes it was a 5-way tie.
Same kind of philosophy of attack it upfield, and make big plays.
Whatever that extra gear he had in game day, he was unstoppable. He would transform.
You've just seen why Steve Entman is considered the premier defensive football player out of the trenches this season.
If you want to talk about the USC game, which was where Todd Bredovich said, "All I saw was purple," that was Steve Entman he saw.
And it is Steve Entman.
It was not that enjoyable.
I think it's the first time we really came together as a team good and got the job done.
Amazing performances were plentiful for the Huskies' dominant defensive tackle. But like all great players, Entman saved his best performance for last. On the greatest stage of all,
He was sick with the
Rose
flu
Bowl.
the week of the game and in the hospital.
Let's play it. Quarterback sack back at the 41. Steve Entman.
From watching that guy, how he manhandled offensive players from the Rose Bowl to Michigan Wolverines, driving them back, I've never seen a college defensive tackle do that.
I hate to keep flipping an old cliche, folks, but that's the horse.
He would put the guard in his left hand and a tackle in his right hand, and he would take them both and pick them up and move them right into the quarterback.
That's one of the best offensive linemen in America, Matt Elliott. That big old guy right there
Just beat a triple team.
In 1991, Entman's
Shed.
final season, he racked up 60 tackles, 20 of which were tackles for loss. Entman was the Pac-10 Defensive Player of the Year, while also earning the Outland Trophy, Lombardi Award, and Consensus All-American honors.
And
Never seen
Heisman
a
finalist.
defensive player that dominant ever.
Steve Entman bulldozes his way to the top of our list of the Pac-12's greatest defensive linemen.
All right. Thank you for listening into those couple video things here. And I love all the questions, guys. I really want to get as many as I can, from everybody as this show keeps going on from week to week here. And I'm going to wrap up the show with a couple of announcements. Next week at letpurplerain.com, I will be premiering my 2025 CFF Draft Guide. This is the biggest draft guide I have ever done, going all the way back to my start in college fantasy football back in 2008. It is coming out tomorrow, Monday, June 23rd. It includes my keys to fantasy success, coaching systems and scheduling information, tons of player spotlights. I have player rankings for FBS, Power 4, and Group of 5. I'm also including specific rankings for Underdog Fantasy and the Scott Fish Tadpole Bowl. You're going to get player projections. You're going to get Fantrax player ranking upload files. That's where you can take my player rankings, upload it directly into your Fantrax leads. It'll just be automatically all set up for you. And I'm also doing draft strategy analysis articles. Those draft strategy analysis articles, those are all in the draft guide. I have one for every set of player rankings, but I'm also going to be releasing them one every day, Monday through Friday, this upcoming week here on letpurplereign.com. I'm going to have them as standalone articles as well, just so people want to be able to find them on the website. It's just a little easier for you guys to do that. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be doing it Monday through Friday. All of those are in this draft guide. I think it's going to be one of the must-have draft guides for 2025, guys. And the other thing I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be doing my golden ticket giveaway number 5. And I'll be drawing 8 more lucky winners into the 2025 Battle for the Belt 52-man league challenge. You could get the opportunity to play against 4 of the top CFF names in college fantasy football with myself, Eric Froton, Jared Palmgren, and John McKechnie. Each of these guys are from some great websites out there, and do great college fantasy football work. The winner gets an amazing custom wrestling championship belt, which you can see a picture of it there on the screen for those of you that are watching. And that custom belt that I'm giving away, I want to give special thanks to armchampionshipbelts.com for being this event's sponsor and making such an awesome looking belt that I can give away to you guys. If you aren't already a premium subscriber, sign up now so you'll be automatically entered into the golden ticket giveaways. If your name is drawn, I will send you an invite to the league via an email from Fantrax. Please be watching your inbox and spam folders to make sure that you claim your golden ticket. There will be a cutoff date. If I see that people have not claimed their golden tickets, I'm going to re-release those back for everybody in the final 7th drawing. I'm going to be doing these drawings over the next 3 weeks. So every Wednesday, I'm going to be doing this here. And I'm going to wrap up here by just, asking all, or saying again, thank you guys for watching the brand new Fantasy Reign Rundown on the Let Purple Reign podcast. Don't forget, follow the Let Purple Reign podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Thanks for joining. Your CFF Reign starts here.